Okay, here we are for class 19, chapter 19. Studio is a very simplified version of the Tech Jobs app, but is going to give you guys an opportunity to work through authentication, just setting up basic authentication. And this is really going to be pretty much the same thing that you will have done in coding events as part of the chapter, as you've been, going through all of these sections and the reading and following all the instructions that they do it for that coding events app. So if you've already done that, this should be, pretty much straightforward because it's the same process, but it's really good to get this practice in and make sure that you kind of have it, solidified in your mind. So the main thing here is to, make sure the database has been set up, and I already have the dependency in here. And if I go over into application.properties, I have gone ahead and added my environmental variables to obscure my, information that I'm using here so that it's, stored locally on my computer and won't be in the GitHub repo. So that part's done. I've got that all set up to work with my database. So I'm pretty much ready to go ahead and get to business on creating a user model and login and registration and the authentication controller and all that. So we're going to, go through this process. I may do a little bit of copying and pasting just because it's I've already covered this in great detail in lecture, but here we go. So let's add this in the models. We're going to add a user class, make it an entity, and extend abstract entity. So we have an ID, and then we're just going to have username and PW hash, as we have done before. We don't need a, oh yeah, we do. We need a controller, a constructor, I mean, for this. But we're going to change this to password. And once we get the encoder in here, equals bcrypt password and encoder, and I need to add a new in front of that. New, there we go. I can use this encoder.encode password and then set that value into the hash field here to go into the database. All right. Okay, and then the last thing is to just add is matching password. So we'll have a way to check the login password against what's stored in the database. Encoder.matches will do that for us by hashing the password and comparing it to the PW hash. It's part of this object. Okay. We will be calling this later from the controller. Okay. So let's go ahead and get the repository set up. I'm going to create an interface called user repository. Give that all of the classic stuff, extends, cred repository. It needs to be for the user class. And of course, the ID is an integer. And then we'll add this custom query method that is just meant to return a user get by username, oops, lowercase n, and pass in the string username, whatever the user has supplied from the login page. We will, be able to take that and go look it up in the database. Okay, so let's head on over to, I think we'll create, do the, let's go ahead and do, let's see, what order they tell us to do it in, right? Okay, user, repository, yeah. So let's do the controller, and then we'll set up the DTOs after that. Okay, so up here in controllers, I'm going to add an authentication controller, which of course needs to have the controller annotation. It needs a user repository object to be able to look up and save things to that user repository in the database. And then for now, we're going to add the utilities we need for session handling that they talk about here. So private, static, final, string, user, session key equals user. And then I'm gonna, I've been putting set before get. I think I like to be able to kind of explain it that way. So I think I'll do that again. And yeah, next I'm going to go ahead and do the private static void set user in session. And that's going to, we're going to want to access the session here and the user object. So we want to pass both of those in. Let me fix this import. There we go. All right. So the first thing to do is to add the attribute. I'm sorry, set attribute. I'm thinking about handler methods. Okay. Set attribute, and we want it to be that user session key that's user. And we want to give it the value of the ID that is part of the user object in our entity. So we'll get that out of the user and then set that key value pair in the session. And then all we've got to do after that. Nope, that's it. That's all we got to do. Okay. Then the last one is, this is actually meant to be public. Again, we'll use the session from the HTTP session interface. And then we'll do several things here. We're going to look up the user ID from the session. So we're, getting attribute this time and going and looking up that session key that we had set. And if that user ID is null, then we can just return null because we don't have a user to provide for them. So then we, if we haven't done that, then the next thing to do is to say, okay, we've got a user ID coming out of the session, but we need to see if we can actually locate them in the database. Using the ID. Okay, looks like I didn't put my import on the optional class. There we go. So if that user optional is empty, if there's actually nothing there coming back from the database, then we can just return null again. Well, not again, but yeah. So otherwise we will return user optional get so that we can pull the user object out of this container from the optional. And that way, you know, as we set up here, we're returning an actual user object. So this get method will do that for us. All right, so those are the three things that we needed. We needed this key to be set so that we could use it both here and here to set a user in a session and get a user from a session. So those are set. The next thing we're going to be doing down here will be the handlers. But first, we're going to go, we can't really do this until we have the DTO set up, because those are the objects we're going to use to bind the data that's in the form to the data that is coming in through our post handlers to save. Okay, so the next thing to do is the DTOs. Let's go to this and add models. We're going to add a package, call it DTO. And then inside the DTO package, we can have our classes. So login form DTO. And this doesn't get any sort of annotation. It does not extend anything or implement anything. It's just that. So this is where we will say that we have, you know, private string username and private string password. And these are going to bind to the fields, the input fields that are in the form. And we don't need a constructor here, but we do need getters and setters for both of these. And we also want to put the annotations on that are going to, you know, like username is required. These are going to actually provide for having validation for the form fields on the page. And I can really just copy this here. And then we'll also limit the size of this and say min is 3, max is 30. Oops. And message equals username must be 3 to 30 characters long. And then let's use that, you know, this kind of same group here for password, but I'm going to just, of course, change everything to password. And I'll make this like 8 because 3 would be too short for a password. So that'll do it for this DTO. We now you know, have a good structure for these two fields. We also need one for the registration form. And this one will extend the login form DTO, so we can go ahead and inherit the username and password classes. And then all we really need, my bad, is I probably should have copied the other one. Yeah, you know what? I go back and I'm going to just copy this from here. This is better. It's got the password and stuff in it. Yeah, and what we really want, so the only difference is this is now verify password. This is the second password field, but it'll have the same exact validation. And this will be the third field of the, you know, of the 3 fields in the registration form. So now we can just create the getter and setter for that. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have these, we can use these. We can use them in our template and use them in the controller. So the next thing that they want us to do here is to add the get handler. So we'll go over to the authentication controller and do that. And this is going to be for, which one do they want us to do first? Register. And again, me with the not tabbing on the, okay. So public string, display registration form. How's that? And we do actually need the model class here so that we can pass in a new instance of registration form DTO. And that will create the registration form DTO variable. And then we'll pass it to this register template. Okay, good. So let's go create that template. I'm just going to put it directly in the templates directory, and we'll just call it register. And if we go and look at the other stuff they've got here, they've got some fragments that they're using. So I'm gonna kind of borrow from their structure so it fits in here. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to replace the entire thing. And then all we'll do differently is we will, you know, instead of tech jobs here, we'll say something like, you know, sign up or something, or yeah, that's fine. I'm thinking too hard about this. Okay. And then we can have our form, and to get that, I'm just going to go back to, I'm just going to go back to here and borrow what they actually already had, because this is, get the whole form here. This is exactly the same thing as you need from the coding events project. It really doesn't need to be any different. I think the only thing that is different is I put validation on the verify password. And that's not here. The other thing that is different is I actually called my DTO registration form DTO. So I'm going to fix that real quick. Otherwise, we would have problems. Grab it here, 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 and here. Okay, so each of these are binding to username, password, and verify password that are part of that DTO class. And that'll give us that model binding to return those values to the post handler. So speaking of post handlers, that's what we need next. Let's come back to here, and we'll do the post handler. Process registration form. And we'll get the model attribute for the binding, the valid for the validation. And we'll call this a registration form DTO, registration form DTO. And then we need errors dot, no, not dot, errors. And then we need the HTTP servlet request and model. Okay. That's a very, very long line. Let's make that where we can see it all. And I'm also going to get rid of this terminal. There we go. Okay, so we have everything we need to be passed in. So the next thing to do is to go ahead and start, you know, going through all of the things that we would send them back to the form for. If we're going to go back to the instructions here, I just want to track with the instructions. Yeah, so first we check for validation errors. Then we see if there is actually already an existing user that they're trying to re-register. Then we see if the password fields don't match, since there's 2 of those on the register form. And then after that, we can, you know, create the user, save the user, create a session, send them to the homepage. Okay. So one thing at a time. First, if errors has errors, return register. Very, very simple. all of the validation errors that would have caused this, we have messages for in the models, so we're good there. The next thing is to look up and see if there's an existing user. So I'm going to go to the user repository, find by username. This is find by username. I bet I misnamed this. Let's go back. Yeah, I said get. Now, CRUD repository has very particular rules about this, and I should have used find. So now that that's that way, it should be okay. Yeah, find by username. There we go. Yeah, it's important to use the official rules for this, or it would definitely not work. And then we will pass in the username that they gave us. So we're going to go to the registration form DTO object that was passed in here with model binding and access that with the getter. That will give us that existing user. So the first thing to do, or the next thing to do, is to check and see if that is not null, because that means they've already registered that username. And then this reject value will allow us to put a custom message into the template. And this part can be anything I want it to be, because we're not actually using any sort of external file to store this. So we're going to use this default message instead to say, you know, a user with that username already exists. And that'll take care of that. A little difficult to read. Let's do this. Boom and boom. Okay. All right. But we also want to make sure to return them back to the form if this is true as well. Okay. Next is to send them back to the form if the passwords didn't match. So we'll get the password. We'll get the verify password. Yeah, get verified password. Good. And now we can just compare them and say if they are not equal, so not password equals verify password. So if that's not true, we want to, you know, do another one of these errors.reject value. I'm going to copy this and we'll just change a couple things. So this field is going to be the verify password field. I think I want to put it on, and we'll say, you know, password mismatch. And then we can say, you know, passwords do not match. Okay. And then return them to register. All right. But if none of those things have happened, if they've not been sent back to the form, now we can do what, you know, we would hope would eventually happen, which is to save them, create this new user and start a new session, get them logged in, and then get them to the homepage. So we will go to get a user, and I'm going to just call them like, you know, new user. And then we'll pass into this constructor get password. And so we have a new user. You know what? I'm going to make this longer because I just keep running out of space. There we go. And then, no, don't need that line. User repository. Okay, so we are creating a new user of the user class. If you remember, the user class will take this password into the constructor and then hash it. So that when we are saving new user to the database, that password is now hashed. Okay, Then we want to say, okay, we've got a new user, they've been saved to the database. Now we want to set them in session. So we're going to first use the request to get the session. And then we're going to give that new user object. And this is the same method that we wrote up here, set user in session, that took a session and a user and just uses session.set attribute, uses the key user, and then goes and gets the ID. Now, because now that they're in the database, we can get an ID for them, right? So that's why this has to come next. All right. And then the last thing is to redirect. And we can just say redirect because we're just going to send them to the home page. Okay. So that should work for that. Next, we want to handle the login data. We want to do exactly what we just did. The get handler is so similar. I'm just going to copy it here and then just change this to be for the login page. And then here we'll say display login form and also change this to login form DTO. Okay, so we can display this page with the model sent down for that so that it's aware of those two fields. And then the form will be very similar to register. So let's add a new form here and call it login. And let's just take register and copy it and paste it. And then we can get rid of verify password. We don't need that. And then we just need to change this to be login form DTO everywhere. Okay. Good. So now we can go back to the authentication controller and set our register, our login post handler. I'm going to copy this just to kind of help demonstrate what's the same and what's different. First thing I need to do clearly is to change this to login and change this to login. And then of course use login form DTO instead. But it takes, takes errors, takes request, takes model. Actually, I didn't end up needing model, I don't think, for anything in this, did I? Interesting. Yeah, I guess because I wasn't passing in any sort of title or anything like that. So yeah, we don't actually need that. Interestingly enough, oops. Oh, that's right. But we do want to check for errors and then send them to login. We do want to look up an existing user to make sure that the user is in the database. So I'm going to take the username from the page and use the repository to try to look them up. But here's where things get different. We ultimately will want to set them in the user session and redirect, but we're not going to be creating a new user. We're not going to be saving them to the database. And then there's different logic here in terms of the things that we want to have errors for. So really, the only thing that I would say is, right here, we were looking to see, does the username exist? Does the password match? Instead, we're going to want to combine kind of all of that. So I'm going to take that part out and I'll change this to existing user. But in the meantime, before we do that, we're going to want to also get the password from the form. And then we want to check these things all at once. I have mentioned this in lecture and I'll mention it again, security through obscurity. We typically want to not give them too much information about why their attempt to log in failed. So I'm going to say, if existing user is null, or if the existing user is matching password, and then give them the password they supplied. If either of those things are true, then we want to catch this, and we can use, I guess I could have kept this part. Okay, but I'm going to put it on password. There is no verify password on the login page. I'm going to say it's invalid, and then I'm going to be really cagey here and just kind of say, credentials invalid. You could say, please try again. I don't know, but you don't want to tell them which it was, because that protects. If it's somebody who's out there trying to hack someone else's account, then it's better to be a little more vague. And then we'll return login to send them back to the login template. So that's pretty much it. This one is slightly simpler. And then the last thing to do is the logout. So just below this, we will use get mapping, and we're going to do it for this path logout. And of course, logout doesn't have a template. It's just a link that will be in the header. And so we really just are saying if this route gets hit and comes into the controller because someone tried to go to this route, here's what you do. And what we want to do is have log out, and then we just want to access this request and just say request get session. Oops, that is the wrong one. There we go. .invalidate. So what that does is it says, okay, we had a valid session. The user was, in progress. They were actively using the site as a logged in user. We're going to invalidate that session and make it to where they no longer have access to any restricted pages until they log in again. And then we will redirect them back to the login page now that they have logged out. All right. So I think, I want to check these fragments. It has a logout link here, and that's fine. But I want to show you how you can actually do this with the particular. Okay, let me see if I can find this for you. Let's go to one of these, for example. With the JavaX library, you actually have access directly to the session from the template. So you don't have to pass anything down from the handler using model, to the page. We can actually use this shortcut. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. So in the fragments, you can actually have, a little bit of a separation between what it is you want to show them if they are logged in versus what you want to show them if they're logged out. So I'm just going to replace this right here with, a list that has 2 TH blocks in it. And this one says, if there's a session and the session is empty, then only show, register and login. Otherwise, if there's not a session, unless there's a session and session is empty, then show them add jobs and log out. Let's go so far and just check to make sure this part works, because that'll be a really great indicator that we have a session. I'm gonna start this up, but we won't actually have any sort of filtering in place just yet to protect certain pages from being seen. All right. Okay, so you can see that I've got this one job that was already in my database from messing around with this earlier. I can go to the register page and we can try, Bruce Wayne. Give him a password. and register. And we have an error. Okay. Null pointer exception at line 63 of the authentication controller. Okay. So I'm going to come in here, go to line 63, existing user. Okay, so maybe our user didn't get created. I can look at the, so I can look at the DTO, but the form, okay, the form was working. I think we should look at user. Okay, now that's interesting. So it's telling me username is assigned but never accessed, and that is because I forgot to put a getter in here for username. And that's important. Let me restart this. Okay. Then I'll come back, do this part again. Let me make sure it's what I think it is. There we go. And I still have an error. Oh, good heavens. Yeah, so we've got an issue, null pointer exception, authentication controller, line 63. It says it's a null pointer exception, which usually happens if you're trying to call a method on something that doesn't exist. Aha. I forgot to auto wire it. Yeah, these annotations are important. Okay. Let me restart this. Okay, and then we'll go back and try this part again. That's not what I meant to type. All right. All right. So we have a new user, and now we see add jobs or log out as our option instead of log in or register. Let's log out. Now we're back to register and log in. Try going into the login page. Oh, funny. I forgot to change the kind of title and the button label. Let's do that. I'm going to head over to login.html. This is what happens when you cut and paste, guys. It's helpful and then also not. So we're going to say log in, and then down here, log in. Okay. So that should get us a login page that actually says login. There it is. Okay. Now I can try to win and then the password, and now I have another issue. Not now. No default constructor for entity user. Okay. Oops. You're right. I failed to do that. Wow, guys, I am making mistakes left and right, but this, will at least show you why this stuff is important. Yeah, it was trying to create this and couldn't. So, all right, so we're going to restart that. And let's come back. All right, so now logged in, good. Add jobs, log out. Takes us back to log in. There's the register page. There's the home page. Now, really the only thing left is to actually have pages be off limits, because I could still, come in here and say, add, and it'll still take me here even though I'm logged out. So that's where the filtering comes in. So let's come back to our instructions here. Yeah, so we're good with all of this. And so we just need to filter the requests. Okay. Let's go to the very top level here to the name of the project, where all the main code is, and we'll call this Authentication Filter. Okay, and this is going to, excuse me, give us a way to intercept these requests and decide whether or not they should continue to the handler or not. So the only thing we really actually need in here is to auto wire the authentication controller. In the original example for coding events, I noticed that they were also auto wiring the user repository, but then never using it. And I didn't realize that right away, but by the time I got done with my lecture example, I realized that it was actually unnecessary. So I'm just leaving it out. Okay, so this is where we're going to create this whitelist that we need. And as list, good. For this one, we really just need logout, log in no particular order, obviously, register, and I should be putting the slashes in front of these. And CSS, because we do want to make sure that any of the CSS files, the bootstrap and all the custom stuff is all in there. Okay. And then we can write our little method here is whitelisted. No, I'll type it out. There's something about you can copy and paste things, but it's generally a good idea when you're first learning, especially to type things out, because it helps you get better at typing code, which requires a certain kind of muscle memory, but also because it helps solidify the concepts if you're kind of having to think about why you're writing for a for loop and an if block and all that kind of thing as you're typing. Okay, so we're looping through the whitelist, checking to see if whatever path is being requested actually begins with or is one of these. And if so, it'll allow it. If not, it won't. So here's the important one, though. This is where we are going to override this pre-handle method. And this is the one that actually runs before it gets any of the handlers for any of the routes in the controllers. So we'll say public Boolean lowercase pre-handle, and I actually will go ahead and just copy this part because it'll save a little time. So we use the request, and we also are going to use the response to help us route to the login page if they're not in session. If it's whitelisted, we'll say, send in the request URI from the URL, just the part that has the path. And that, there we go. And then if so, return true. And then we can skip all of the rest of this if the page is already whitelisted. Okay. So we're going to go and get the session out of the request. Make sure I get this imported. We're going to get a user and get it right out of the session. So this is why we wrote the get user from session method in the controller, which we, wired up here so we can have access to it. So that we can actually pull the user out of the session if they exist in there. And then we can tell, you know, if someone's logged in or not. So if they're not null, they're logged in, return true. Otherwise, we're going to take the response, send redirect, and send them to login. And then we can return false to indicate that they were in fact not logged in, and so that's why we're, you know, redirecting. Okay, feel like it's unhappy with this. Why is it unhappy with this? All right, I've got something that's not quite right. Let me see what's going on here. Okay, we've got this error. It says that it does not override method from its superclass. Oh, we did not implement handler interceptor. Yep. Okay. So it only knows that, you know, about this if it actually has this interface implemented for this class. So of course it didn't, it wasn't thinking we were overriding anything. Okay. So let's start this back up. Oh no. Well, I mean, we can start it up, but we're actually not done yet. Let's go finish this. We've got the whitelist, and now we need to do the registration. So we're going to do this web application config. And this is, I can get to here. Here we go. Another file that we're going to create at the top level. Web application config. And this one gets this configuration annotation to make sure that Spring knows that it's a configuration file. They actually give us the rest here. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this in, and we can just talk about it. How's that? Okay, so this configurer is an interface that is implemented in order for us to access the interceptors. This just, yeah, means the spring manage object, but that just returns an instance of the authentication filter. And then here, we are going to tap into the registry for the Spring application and add this interceptor authentication filter. So now there is actually something in place that will intercept the requests and only allow the whitelisted pages to be seen by the public. So let's try it. Okay, come back over here. Just going to go back. And yeah, it's not showing our, it's not showing the CSS, even though I allowed it. That's interesting. Pretty sure I put it in the whitelist, didn't I? Oh, I forgot the slash. Ha ha ha. Man, it's the little things, guys, always. All right, there it is. All right. So we can register, we can log in. I'm going to use my Bruce Wayne identity again. And there we are. So I could come in, I can add a job, I can log out, and now I'm back to register and log in being my options. And if I go to tech jobs, it just reroutes me to log in because the home page is not one of the pages that is whitelisted. Similarly, I can try to go to add, and it just sends me back to login. So there you have it. That is basic authentication, for better or for worse, with me. But hey, we learn from our mistakes. So I hope you found some of that troubleshooting instructive.